let's examine the difference between derivative and transformative use and how AI outputs can unintentionally reproduce copyrighted or licensed material. As developers, we're not just handling data, we're handling other people's work. Whether it's text, code, or images, every time we prompt an AI system, we're potentially remixing something that was learned from existing material. And something that's interesting, if you produce copyrighted material in the output, that is not the responsibility of OpenAI or ChatGPT. You own the outputs, or your organization owns the outputs. So the compliance is up to you, which is sort of sneaky and counterproductive. You would think that, well, the compliance should be on the person training the model, which as developers we are, but OpenAI has a little loophole because the outputs are owned by the person who writes the prompt. And that's why we practice prompt engineering, to make sure that we're not adding anything in the inputs, meaning our plain language prompts that steer the model to avoid copyright. But when you're using ChatGPT, Gemini, and other models, we don't know what training data that they used. So we have to be careful as much as possible when we're creating our prompts, because we own them. And that brings us to one of the most important legal and ethical questions in AI. Is your output derivative or transformative? Let's break it down. First, the developer's response. Developers must ensure that outputs transform source material, which adds new purpose, context, or meaning. So let's examine derivative use. A derivative work copies or closely reproduces the original, meaning the same structure, same expression, and maybe even the same lines of code. And that's risky territory because it may violate copyright or licensing terms, especially if the model was trained on proprietary or copyrighted data, and it risks copyright or attribution violation. When thinking of transformative use, a transformative work, on the other hand, adds new purpose, context, or meaning. It changes the expression enough that it becomes a new creation, like paraphrasing documentation, summarizing logs, or generating pseudocode inspired by an idea rather than replicating it. We're interpreting or reframing ideas in a new form, and it aligns with ethical, compliant development. When we use AI responsibly, our goal is to always stay on the transformative side of that line. So let's turn theory into practice and spot the risk. You've just learned that the difference between derivative and transformative use often decides whether your AI-assisted work is compliant or not. Now let's train your developer eye to spot the difference. Ask if the output could replace the original content. Also watch for identical structure. Favor summaries and reinterpretations over copies, and document sources and model influence. Furthermore, treat copyright as data privacy to limit exposure, cite sources, and paraphrase rather than copy. Use prompt tags like format only or voice only, like we did in the mini crash course for prompt engineering, to avoid reproduction. So just remember the 4 core developer duties. These are engineering principles that protect data, users, and systems. First, data minimization. Collect and store only what's required. Purpose limitation. Use data solely for its stated intent only. Transparency in records, log datasets, model versions, and prompts. And finally, user rights. Enable access, export, and deletion. And last but not least, we go from governance to practice. Here, AI safety, compliance, and ethical design translate governance into real engineering behavior. AI safety is really reproducibility plus fairness plus documentation. Ethical design is predictable behavior plus user trust. And compliance is clean engineering. Just remember, as a developer, everyday engineering practices already support responsible AI. Documentation and logging demonstrate system integrity, and transparency turns good code into compliant systems. And on that note, I hope this has been informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.